come to a more rigorous refutation of this claim of the positivism. No one can purposefully not act. Now consider, however, some economic opposition. What is consumed now cannot be consumed again later. Without private property in production factors, there can be no prices, and without prices, cost accounting is impossible. If we increase the amount of money without increasing the quantity of non-money goods, social wealth will not be higher, but only prices will rise. What is consumed now cannot be consumed again later. Reputation. Economic proposition. Prices will rise. What is consumed now cannot be consumed again later. Prices will rise. Without private property in production sectors, there can be no prices, and without prices, cost accounting is impossible.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the No Way Jose podcast. Today, I am joined by Toad. We're on part 24 of a live reading of Democracy, the God That Failed. We are starting in on the last chapter. We'll probably break this down into 2 or 3 parts. But with that, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get Toad in here and get into it. What is up, my friend? I think it's quite fitting. We're finishing on this. As I've kind of made it, as of late, it seems the topics seem to run into current events. Well, I think we're probably, at least for me, at an all-time high of, oh no, what the hell do we do from here? And we are on the last chapter on the impossibility of limited government and the prospect for revolution. So this is kind of the praxis of what to do. Everything's fucked. What now? What do
must
now?
Be done? Yeah.
What do now? That will be my book.
There you go.
Yeah. What do now? And his will be what must be done. Mm-hmm. So I think it's fitting we're on that one. But I don't any thoughts, Toad? What's going on with you? We've been doing these pretty consistently lately. I've been getting a lot of comments. This is one of those sleeper series that surprisingly gained quite a following. And I've actually had some people even make the suggestion that we should maybe continue with other works of live reading. Maybe do like Bob Murphy next, something. Maybe that could be my way to earn him unblocking me for whatever it is I did to earn a block in the first place. We talked about this before.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
he's
maybe
never
that
followed
way.
me, but he's picky. But blocking you, that's crazy.
And despite the fact that he's always been, I've done, for those who aren't aware, I've done a number of live reading series on my show. So go check out the playlist if you have other theory, particularly type stuff you want to dig into. But I've always, after live reading, I always kind of wanted to do chaos theory. So maybe we should do that next. It would be fitting. I can get unblocked by Bob that way. But
I'm down. It's short.
Yeah, it is pretty short. So I don't know. Maybe that could be. But point being is, I've had people even ask that maybe we make that our thing. I guess we have free Wednesdays now, so we may as well make it a regular. And I kind of like the idea of I've gotten way more into the parapolitical and conspiracy for my show. I like keeping one foot into the theory world and just a little bit of a steady stream of live readings with Toad.
It's gay, but yeah, I mean, we could do other books as well.
The audience likes it. This is what the people want. I'm surprised. Like, it's one of those ones. Like, it's not like it's not like part 24 of a live reading of Democracy. The God That Fails. I know is like, oh, this is gonna do numbers, but like, I'll be honest. It's one of those things you would think this would be something that I've completely lost the audience by this point, and you're getting like 8, and that's not even to say that Hoppe's bad or anything. It's just, it's one of those things that you're over 20 parts into a deep book. You'd think I'd be lost, but no, there's actually surprisingly a pretty good little stream of people that keep sticking around for these. And if anything, it probably does actually better than a lot of the normal episodes, even for a very, very deep part of an episode, which I think is weird for series. So this is this series is a little engine that could. And I guess it's like, I only started doing these just because I like this sort of nerdy stuff. But hey, you guys kind of came along with us, and so I guess we can keep doing this. Perhaps, I don't know.
Is it us or is it Hoppe that's bringing the people? I don't know.
I don't know. We'll find out. I guess once we move on to Bob Murphy, we'll find out if they like the slightly different flavor of goofy pacifist Christian, although it doesn't come across in his writings, to be honest. At least I never got that impression. I know he has slightly different takes on some things than maybe some standard people like Hoppe. But that's enough of that. We're not talking here to talk about Bob Murphy. We're here to finish up our live reading of Democracy, the God That Failed. Let's go ahead and get into it, buddy. We do have a little bit of a larger section to knock out today.
We're going to be here longer.
Although there's some pretty meaty footnotes. So I'll go ahead and let you start off. That way you can kind of get the lazy jump and do the one page, and I'll do the next 2 pages. So
all right, yeah. Since I'm the more retarded reader here.
It's just because I like your analysis better, and that means you take prime analysis because you're a reader. So there you go. This is but go ahead. Yep.
I'm
the better reader.
Stuff that I read too. But
I'm the better reader. You're the better analyzer. Analyzer.
Yeah. I'm the gayer one.
Yeah.
We should name this series of us reading stuff. We should name it the Retarded Reader. How about that?
That's not bad. That's actually not bad. But anyway,
I'll have to think about it. But I don't know. There's got to be a name for it. All right, we're on chapter 13, final chapter, on the impossibility of limited government and prospect for revolution. In a recent survey, people of different nationalities were asked how proud they were to be American, German, French, etc., and whether or not they believed that the world would be a better place if other countries were just like their own. The countries ranking highest in terms of national pride were the United States and Austria. As interesting as it would be to consider the case of Austria, here I shall concentrate on the United States and the question whether and to what extent the American claim can be justified. In the following, I will identify 3 main sources of American national pride. I will argue that the first 2 are justified sources of pride, while the third actually represents a fateful error. Finally, I will go on to explain how this error might be repaired.
I don't think there's any commentary to be provided.
A little bit of intro. It's just America, fuck yeah. That's what we're going to talk
America,
about.
And then Austria weirdly has an odd case of self-confidence, but good for them, I guess.
I don't know, man, because they were full of Z Germans.
I really can't even think of a reason why Austria would be so hyped, but I'm happy for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have thought that it would have been other European nations, but like I think a lot of those European nations have it because they want to maintain their like cultural identity. Yeah, Austria is a little weird because I think that German identity seeps in a lot there, but
they're kind of middling into a lot of different like European tropes. Like you kind of just vaguely associate them with all of them, but nothing that they take like the supreme reign of that thing, like whatever European characteristic you're thinking of. But anyways,
maybe he just said it because of the Austrian school. He's like, let's throw it.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, they do have the most superior form of economics, so I will give them that. I don't know how that didn't even come to mind, because I don't even, when I think of Austrian economics, I don't even think of Austria, because it doesn't make any fucking sense to me, because it has nothing to do with the country, other than that's where it sort of has its roots in a sense.
Mises was from there, and yeah. I don't know. I think he was, at least. All right.
But yeah.
The first source of national pride is the memory of America's not-so-distant colonial past as a country of pioneers. In fact, the English settlers coming to North America were the last example of the glorious achievements of what Adam Smith referred to as a system of natural liberty, the ability of men to create a free and prosperous commonwealth from scratch. Contrary to the Hobbesian account of human nature, homo homini lupus est, the English settlers demonstrated not just the viability, but also the vibrancy and attractiveness of a stateless, anarcho-capitalist social order. They demonstrated how, in accordance with the views of John Locke, private property originated naturally through a person's original appropriation, his purposeful use and transformation of previously unused land, wilderness. Furthermore, they demonstrated that based on the recognition of private property, division of labor, and contractual exchange, men were capable of protecting themselves effectively against antisocial aggressors. First and foremost, by means of self-defense, less crime existed than exists now. And as society grew increasingly prosperous and complex, by means of specialization, i.e. institutions and agencies such as property registries, notaries, lawyers, judges, courts, juries, sheriffs, mutual defense associations, and popular militias. Moreover, the American colonists demonstrated the fundamental sociological importance of the institution of covenants, of associations of linguistically, ethnically, religiously, and culturally homogeneous settlers led by and subject to the internal jurisdiction of a popular founder to ensure peaceful human cooperation and maintain law and order.
I did think it was interesting here. He kind of made the point that essentially the origin of America is founded in very much the anarcho-capitalist roots, and that's kind of the point. Which I guess, I think we're probably going to build on this with the concept of like limited government and how it's like impossible, kind of building off that. But the idea of kind of that's what it built from, obviously by necessity, because they were coming into a new land. I mean, just to what degree can you really impose a new governing body in a foreign land? I mean, you might have like their version of sheriffs or local municipalities or something, but that's kind of his point. It's like, yeah, it's not maybe not strictly anarcho-capitalism, but some sort of proto something with maybe some sort of smaller government figures or something along those lines here and there. Yeah. But for the most part, people have to appropriate their own property, have to take care of their own property. It's pretty well understood amongst the people of any given area whose property, and they settle those disputes, amongst themselves. And I know we get these ideas of, they tell us this, the Wild West, the Hatfield and McCoys, we'll all just kind of war against all against all or whatever. But that's a little bit of a fictitious view, and I wouldn't be surprised if we dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he's talking about like the original like colonists while they were still under British rule, or when they seceded from British rule with the American Revolution, which both those things are sort of, I guess, pseudo anarcho-capitalist. Maybe. I mean, they definitely believed in like limited government, basically. And he's also talking about how they like homesteaded a lot of unowned land because a lot of the land was unowned, and people will be, oh, well, they came in and they murdered all the Native Americans or whatever, which some of that is true, and I don't even know if that was for the worst. Really, I'm gonna make people really angry about that. But they I mean, every situation's different, so it's hard to speak in broad generalities. I'm sure there's obviously examples we can provide where Americans did awful things. But for example, like I just saw a thing the other day and I dug into it just for fun. The bad guy in Pocahontas, Disney movies, like savages, barely even human, like that guy. I vaguely remember it.
Yeah, well, he apparently, I think it's Ratcliffe, I think might be his name or something.
That's right. Yeah, something
and
like that.
His real story was he was murdered by the Indians when he was trying to conduct a trade to keep the villagers alive because they were all starving to death. and I think they like flayed him to death with shells essentially or something crazy.
Wow.
Essentially, and did his
That's
face
brutal.
last. The idea being is like, so they essentially skinned him alive slowly. And then the people that lived in that body or whatever that village or whatever it was, they apparently whenever they left their little area,
It was
after
like
that
Virginia, somewhere,
whatever it's called, they started
Jamestown, I
the
don't know what the
Indians
fuck it was.
after that started murdering them every time they left. So essentially, they all kind of died off because of that. I think England ended up sending somebody else whose name was like something weird, like literally like War was in his name, which is weird. And he literally came in there with like an iron fist and kind of did the opposite and kind of cleared house.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that to one of our guys, yeah. But I was also basically going to say, like, a lot of the Native Americans, they were also kind of like nomadic. So it's like, how can they claim certain territory when they don't like actually have any, right? So you have to, as you said, if you're going to say this is my property, you also have to be sort of on it and maintaining it in a way. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's not really your property anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is where I guess they did run into issues. But obviously, we're not trying to litigate the past. There were definitely wrongs on both sides, but it's also not the silly, fictitious version we were fed of like, well, they were all super duper nice. And I think it went a little bit more both ways than both sides probably want to admit. So, yeah. But anyways, all right, back. I guess it's to me now. Sorry, I kept giving commentary, being like, "Why aren't we moving on?"
We got a lot of footnotes here. Though.
Yeah,
it's you if you want to start section 2. Yeah.
All right. The second source of national pride is the American Revolution. In Europe, there had been no open frontiers for centuries, and the intra-European colonization experience lay in the distant past. With the growth of the population, societies had assumed an increasingly hierarchical structure of free men, freeholders, and servants, lords and vassals, overlords and kings. While distinctly more stratified and aristocratic than colonial America, the so-called feudal societies of medieval Europe were also typically statist social orders. A state, in accordance with generally accepted terminology, is defined as a compulsory territorial monopolist of law and order, and an ultimate decision-maker. Feudal lords and kings did not typically fulfill the requirements of a state. They could only tax with the consent of the tax, and on his own land every free man was as much a sovereign, an ultimate decision-maker, as the feudal king was on his. However, in the course of many centuries, these originally stateless societies had gradually transformed into absolute statist monarchies. While they had initially been acknowledged voluntarily as protectors and judges, European kings had at long last succeeded in establishing themselves as hereditary heads of state. Resisted by the aristocracy, but helped along by the common people, they had become absolute monarchs with the power to tax without consent and to make ultimate decisions regarding the property of free men.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the chapter, he said, well, I'm going to tell you two things that are actually valid sources of pride. One was the first thing that we just talked about, which is basically like the anarcho-capitalist origins.
Frontier spirit pride is kind of what he's getting at.
Basically, homesteading your own land, whatever. And then number two, he's going to say is the American Revolution, secessionist movement. He hasn't actually mentioned that yet because he's talking about what did they secede from. Oh, and he's talking about how they seceded from monarchies. So again, Hoppe not actually being a monarchist, even though he thinks it's better than democracy, he is about to say that the original American system of government, I believe he's going to say, was an improvement over this monarchy. And he also basically just said that the feudal system that was like the predecessor to the monarchies was also better because the state had less power in that system too. And people will be out there, there'll be, I think, probably a bunch of people in the libertarian world and anarchist world that shit on the feudal system too, but wasn't really that bad.
Well, preferable, that's the whole point of this book. Is like this stuff's sort of preferable. Is the idea, and even then, if we were to compare, 1770 or 1776 to today, you'd prefer to live to today. No one's going to deny that conditions are better today, but if we're comparing so far as rights, and I guess even then, adjusting for the time. And even then, I bet you those people over in the frontier were really roughing and had a really hard time compared to people probably living over in England and stuff. But with that, they got the opposite, the according, which I think is kind of what he's driving, the spirit that they attained through this frontier spirit, the can do, I have to do it myself. The point being is kind of that. I mean, we would probably prefer to live to now, but there definitely was. They had more rights. There's no denying that. But people might point out like, but this or that, it was so bad, it was that. Yeah, but like, it's like compared to what? I mean, compared to the time, compared to maybe someone living in England. And even then, I guess it would be the idea of like, yeah, you may not have the amenities you want in life, but that is more free. And kind of the point I think he's getting at too is essentially what happened with the founding of America. Is, I mean, especially since we jumped over like oceans, a group of people moved over to another continent, essentially formed a separate little group that was essentially had no real government control. And they kind of handled their shit, and then over time, the government kind of subsumed them back into themselves as they reasserted themselves, and that's kind of the point. They had that little period of time where they're on their own, and then they took over, and now that's where we're at with the revolution.
Yeah. I mean, they wanted to get away from that government. Then that government, started imposing itself more and more, as we know, which led up to the American Revolution. Where it's like, no, well, we're over here. You're across an ocean. You're not gonna, tax us like this. Because back then, people did have that spirit, and they were gonna revolt over, taxing stamps and shit like that. What a difference from what people will revolt over now, which is absolutely nothing.
Now they're obviously fucking our children.
And people are still not revolting.
Yeah, they're what? We're like something retarded, like over 40% or something nonsense.
And that stuff is revolting.
Yeah, it is revolting. All right, anyways, these European developments had a twofold effect on America. On the one hand, England was also ruled by an absolute king. At least until 1688, and when the English settlers arrived on the new continent, the king's rule was extended to America. Unlike the settlers' founding of private property and their private, voluntary, and cooperative production of security and administration of justice, however, the establishment of the royal colonies and administrations was not the result of original appropriation, homesteading, and contract. In fact, no English king had ever set foot on the American continent, but of usurpation, declaration, and imposition.
Right. So I think he's basically saying what we just said, where like the colonists did actually like homestead some of this land explicitly, and then the British, monarchy sort of, like you said, subsumed that territory. Well, this is territory that's under British rule, and he's saying, well, the monarchy didn't do anything. They didn't come over there, so we're basically setting up for what happened here is obviously the colonists wound up revolting against the British, and probably that was part of the mindset there. Well, you guys didn't do this. This isn't your territory. This is ours. Like, what are you doing? An
interesting parallel would probably be today, which is a point I've heard many people make recently. Not connecting these two things, but the idea of what we're seeing right now is their propaganda arm is completely hollowed out. Whereas if we're talking about this period in time, we had an opposite problem, I think, where their infrastructure was completely hollowed out because they essentially sent out a frontier unit to a separate continent. They didn't have any real, actual substantive power so far as governing power, and yet they're trying to impose themselves. And there's a similar thing here where I guess the government that does have the infrastructure, does have that real world, we can actually do shit sort of thing going on with our current administration. Like they do have the power to reach out and touch us. But perhaps, I don't know, I guess maybe they could test that. But so far as their propaganda arm, it's pretty damn dead right now. So there's kind of, I don't know, maybe there's something to be said there. I just thought that was interesting, especially in terms of revolting and like kind of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Anyways, on to you, bud.
Oh, it's on to me. All right. On the other hand, the settlers brought something else with them from Europe. There, the development from feudalism to royal absolutism had not only been resisted by the aristocracy, but it was also opposed theoretically with recourse to the theory of natural rights as it originated within scholastic philosophy. According to this doctrine, government was supposed to be contractual, and every government agent, including the king, was subject to the same universal rights and laws as everyone else. While this may have been the case in earlier times, it was certainly no longer true for modern absolute kings. Absolute kings were usurpers of human rights and thus illegitimate. Hence, insurrection was not only permitted, but became a duty sanctioned by natural law. So he's basically saying that I think the colonists were kind of drawing from the feudalism that preceded the monarchy, which was a more free system, basically. It wasn't like an absolute state rule, and it was more contractual. So
yeah, I mean, it was still, my understanding was still somewhat coercive, obviously, but it was very much, to some extent, an agreement, and people were, well, this may sound fucked up. They were kind of in a certain sense, more treated like property, which is kind of the point that he makes a lot in this book. Is this why monarchism is better? Is they treat their subjects like property, and if you're looking at feudalism, every subset is the same thing. Every little fiefdom within a fiefdom within a fiefdom, they're all acting as if they own it.
Well,
which obviously you can't own people. We think that's incorrect, but it's better than everybody owning everybody, which is kind of the alternative of democracy. So
the majority owning the minority, basically. But or really, it still winds up being the ruled owning the ruling owning the ruled. But people just don't make that distinction anymore. But I think he did say that in like feudalism here, it was more like there was a little bit more of like an actual contract where people are like, okay, we'll agree to be taxed. And then I guess if, that agreement was broken or something, maybe they had some sort of recourse there. Whereas under the monarchy, that wasn't really the case anymore. But at least, as he's pointed out a bunch of times in the monarchy, you at least knew who the ruler was and who the ruled were, so you could kind of push back a little bit in that way too, and not allow the monarchy to get away with as much. But he's about to say basically the colonists here were like, well, we're opposing this monarchy, like we want something that's more contractual, like what we had before, pretty much, which was the original idea of the founding of America, at least. All right. The American colonists were familiar with the doctrine of natural rights. In fact, in light of their own personal experience with the achievements and effects of natural liberty, and as religious dissenters who had left their mother country in disagreement with the king and the Church of England, they were particularly receptive to this doctrine. Steeped in the doctrine of natural rights, encouraged by the distance of the English king, and stimulated further by the puritanical censure of royal idleness, luxury, and pomp, the American colonists rose up to free themselves of British rule. As Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, government was instituted to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It drew its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. In contrast, the Royal British government claimed that it could tax the colonists without their consent. If a government failed to do what it was designed to do, Jefferson declared, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Okay, well, it just seems like the last few paragraphs is really just him emphasizing over and over again to what degree the original founders really did believe in the concepts of natural rights and such. I don't know to what degree really can provide any commentary there. You can give a whack at it if you'd like to.
Well, they were opposing, the rule of the monarch. As I said already, it was like too absolute of rule, basically. But I think there was also, as he mentioned, the distance, like, we left you physically for a reason. Now we're over here, and you're going to tax us. We're not agreeing to be taxed that way anymore. So we don't have that agreement. So
I left you, Becky, and now you want alimony. I'm not even with you anymore.
Right. So we're just gonna break free from you. And he did mention the Church of England too, because we know that when the colonists came over, they sort of had their own, religions as well, their own churches. The Puritans and whatever. The
Puritans, the Calvins, all the different different subsects at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's saying all that, but then of course you'll have the statists today will basically try to tell you that, well, we are actually agreeing, to this rule here, where it's like, no, you're not. Like, they'll fall back on the social contract bullshit again, so they'll actually they'll make that claim, which is obviously incorrect. And somebody like Jefferson would probably be looking at what's going on today and rolling in his grave, I would assume. Mm-hmm. Because if they were gonna revolt over the amount
they gave blacks rights,
then, yeah, right. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a joke there, guys.
Yes, exactly. Right. Jefferson's slaves did not have rights, right? All right, we're on to section 3 here. Okay. But what was the next step once independence from Britain had been won? This question leads to the third source of national pride, the American Constitution, and the explanation as to why this Constitution, rather than being a legitimate source of pride, represents a fateful error. Thanks to the great advances in economic and political theory since the late 1700s, in particular at the hands of Ludwig von Mises and Murray N. Rothbard, we are now able to give a precise answer to this question. According to Mises and Rothbard, once there is no longer free entry into the business of the production of protection and adjudication, the price of protection and justice will rise and their quality will fall. Rather than being a protector and judge, a compulsory monopolist will become a protection racketeer, the destroyer and invader of the people and property that he is supposed to protect, a warmonger and an imperialist. Indeed, the inflated price of protection and the perversion of the ancient law by the English king, both of which had led the American colonists to revolt, were the inevitable result of compulsory monopoly. Having successfully seceded and thrown out the British occupiers, it would only have been necessary for the American colonists to let the existing homegrown institutions of self-defense and private, voluntary and cooperative, protection and adjudication by specialized agents and agencies take care of law and order. So
nothing.
Yeah.
Once again, he's just saying, just kind of restating stuff from earlier sections, kind of the idea of that, once a compulsory monopolist comes into play, certain incentives take form.
Yeah, but he's applying it to, he's now talking about the third source of American pride that people,
the Constitution,
I guess, tend to list, which is the Constitution. He's saying that that's invalid because they just broke free from this governmental rule, and the Constitution is going to set up a governmental rule again. Right, as you pointed out, it's even though it set it up to be a really small government, and the government is only going to provide protection of property or whatever, as he's pointed out many times in the book, you have a territorial monopoly here, and inherently that is a property violator. So that property violator can't protect property as well. Like it's just hypocritical, basically. So, he's just pointing that out again, and that's why the Constitution is not something to have pride over. And even though I would argue that it slowed the growth of government, and people will still at least point it out to be like, well, you can't take our guns away, even though they kind of are, but people still have that kind of sentiment in America. So I don't think the Constitution was like completely bad in that way, you know what I mean? But of course,
even then I think it's a trade-off, because even the point that's always made is the slowing the growth essentially allowed the parasite to slow itself down, so it had a larger host. And the parasite to some extent is driving the host, so or at least attempting to drive this. So it created a larger weapon, but for the predators to use, I guess you could say. Although that larger weapon does convert to like a larger source of wealth. So in a certain sense, it gives us a larger wealth pie in order to fight over against the predators, the elite, the whatever. So maybe it's not so bad, actually, the slowing. Maybe because you could say, it gives them more tools to work with. But on the flip side, that gives us more tools to work with, because that likely means we're probably dealing with a wealthier nation or something along those lines, because they gave us a much longer period of time where they essentially allowed the parasitical host to grow, to flourish a lot longer. When you have something like a Bill of Rights and something like that it slows the growth a little bit more.
Right. While it was smaller, there was a lot of human flourishing. And as we pointed out, as he's pointed out in this book, the Constitution also is problematic because it allows the government to check itself, which it is never going to do. So it will still always ultimately grow. And he's saying they should have just not had that at all, and they should have just gone with what they were doing in the first place, which was just more of a natural law sort of private setup that they had for some period of time. He does skip over, as we've mentioned a couple of times, he does completely gloss over the fact that the Articles of Confederation also existed, which was kind of an in-between setup, which was not as bad as the Constitution.
But he probably just didn't even bother, because he's just going to have the same exact analysis for that. And it's
right, but it would have been way more decentralized. So you might not have at least had a huge federal government, at least not as quickly. So
so
maybe you would have had multiple countries, really, and it might have been a better setup. And maybe we never would have had a federal level government. So who knows?
Yep. All right, this did not happen, however. The Americans not only did not let the inherited royal institutions of colonies and colonial governments wither away into oblivion, they reconstituted them within the old political borders in the form of independent states, each equipped with its own coercive, unilateral taxing and legislative powers. While this would have been bad enough, the new Americans made matters worse by adopting the American Constitution and replacing a loose confederation of independent states, the central federal government of the United States.
All right, so he did just mention that.
Yeah.
That was the mention of the Articles of Confederation. Yeah, so he's saying they formed individual states at first, which is bad because those are still states, but then the Constitution set up a federal government, which is even worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
This Constitution provided for the substitution of a popularly elected parliament and president for an unelected king, but it changed nothing regarding their power to tax and legislate. To the contrary, while the English king's power to tax without consent had only been assumed rather than explicitly granted and thus was in dispute, the Constitution explicitly granted this very power to Congress. Furthermore, while kings, in theory even absolute kings, had not been considered the makers but only the interpreters and executors of pre-existing and immutable law, i.e. as judges rather than legislators, the Constitution explicitly vested Congress with the power of legislating and the President and the Supreme Court with the power of executing and interpreting such legislated law. Now, that's an interesting point to make. I don't think I recall having that insight, at least in a while. Obviously, I've read this before, but that is something.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's saying, well, these, the Americans, they just broke free of a taxing monopoly, basically, and now they're essentially setting another one up, which obviously kind of defeats the whole purpose of what they just did. Although they were trying something different, though. I mean, they thought that this checks and balances system would work, which of course was a huge mistake. But they thought they were doing something different, where they were like, okay, we just broke free of this kind of more dictatorial rule, and now we're going to set it up this way. Though, of course, Hoppe, keeps pointing out in this book that what this thing grew into wound up being way worse than a monarchy. But yeah, they set it up so that they're saying basically, oh, well, the legislative branch, the shit that you get taught in school, the legislative branch is going to write the laws, but then they still have to get checked and get through, the executive branch actually has to agree to pass the law. So I guess, the founding fathers were thinking, well, with these checks and balances, the government's going to, these people are going to check each other, but of course that wound up not being what has happened. Although you have had situations where, of course, Congress has been in opposition to a president and such. That has happened before, of course, but really it winds up functioning as this one, unit, because these people get into power and just sort of becomes, the people are the deep state basically at this point. These people are in power and it just keeps going along, and you just wind up getting more and more laws, and it doesn't even have to come from Congress at this point. We're fucked. Anything can just come from
well, the
fiat
point that he's making here is he's also comparing it to monarchies in the sense that at least a conventional monarchy understanding, like the old monarchy, was kind of the idea of that he's making the point that they were essentially judges rather than legislatures. In a certain sense, I guess you can make the case legislators. And I don't know, maybe there was in certain countries they had but maybe there was just kind of a colloquial understanding of what is right and what is wrong, justice, common law, something along those lines. And so from there, that's where the kings or feudal lords or whoever might make their decisions more along those lines. Maybe there's not an explicit set of rules, but it's more along the lines of just kind of justice and understood amongst the land, which is going to be arbitrary depending on the different areas. But essentially, this is a role they take. They're essentially taking on what they're supposed to be doing is taking on the understanding of the land of what is justice, and they're supposed to be enacting it because essentially that's what people are calling out for. And I know there's this idea that they can do whatever, and to some extent as a coercive body they can get away with more than a normal person can, but to some degree, especially if you're comparing a monarchy, where somebody can't really squirrel away from responsibility. Right now, for example, I'm listening to the Anna Paulina, I think that's her name,
Anna Paulina Luna.
Yeah, interview on Rogan. And I'm almost done. I don't even think they talked about the Epstein stuff. And she was literally...
Of course not. She's an Israeli shill.
Yeah, and she's one of the people...
Hot, so
she was on the task force that was supposed to help with releasing the information. And I saw someone kind of giving her crap for that online, and she just passed the buck. And it was kind of well, I said some stuff and I did some things. And you're that's the whole point, is it's all obfuscating responsibility. That's all of this is. It's everyone else's fault, and I can say... Well, I sent in a strongly worded letter, even though it was my job to supposedly be some sort of safeguard here. So my job is done. I did my part. And that's if you're lucky. Likely they'll just fall in line, whatever the thing is. So, But point being is the difference is a king, a monarchy, generally speaking, was kind of, even though you might think it was just arbitrary judgments given out, that was the thing. It was judgments. They were supposed to be a judge. They were operating under a preconceived concept, might be colloquially understood amongst the people or might be explicitly stated somewhere. But essentially, they were operating under another preconceived. And, there might be some level of, the king can do what he wants. But, there is a countervailing force to some degree as well. People aren't going to want to be in your land, especially if you're operating under a feudal thing. Good luck maintaining a happy populace, a happy, productive populace. You have far more incentives in place to provide a. But anyways, point being is that then he goes to then compare and contrast this, and then he goes, well, look at the United States federal government. It's even worse in the sense that they literally now they've explicitly granted the power of legislation where that didn't even exist before.
Right.
And so now there's making shit up. Whereas before it was just why do we need a Supreme Court or this or that? Or why do we... I guess there's Supreme Court to kind of for judgments, but so far as coming up with the actual rules, I guess I can kind of understand, but do we really need the rules to be that spelled out? Right. I think the problem is when you do create more of a universalized system, it does make sense. It does become a common idea of it does make sense to universalize this. If we're going to create a universal system, the problem is a universal system does not work, and we've been into this before. Even the universal system of law, so making it more localized is going to work better. Which even then, funny enough, if you look at a feudal system, it is like a hierarchy all the way down, so it kind of follows that same thing. It's not even really one kingdom per se.
Yeah, and then, he did mention the judicial branch as well, which, this judicial branch will interpret whether these laws that come from the legislative branch are actually abiding by the Constitution, which, of course, then they get to the government just gets to work in tandem again and just interpret that. So, I think, he probably is arguing because I think it's true that this setup, even though maybe it was a novel idea, whatever, they were trying something different, it's actually worse than the monarchy because, again, basically the whole idea of this government is we're setting up this government, and the idea is that it is actually with the consent of the governed. So that basically means that people are less apt to question what the government is doing because it's we gave you consent to do this. So that is actually worse, whereas with the monarchy, you did not.
Yeah, this is against your will. So which is a good point, to the point of I was making judgments that they grant and stuff. To some degree, everything they do is sort of against your will. It's not unless they literally came to you specifically what do you want me to do? That's not how judgments are played. They don't consult you. They have to hope that they are just tapped in enough with the populace and are keeping them happy enough. Or whatever. So and they actually have we've talked about this, in this book, obviously democracy, they're incentivized to be parasitical and get out, whereas these people are stuck to the ruling class. They don't get to just bounce after 4 years or 8, or when they lower the term limits, they can accelerate their parasitical tendencies and do it in 2 or whatever the different thing is.
Right.
So yeah, whereas with a king, it's okay, well, kings get killed. You hear all the time tales in history about how the bad king and how he gets, all these tales. Oh, he had to get murdered by another family member, and it was because he was just such a wicked king, and he couldn't rule the people. We couldn't have that. The person who acted in the most duplicitous way you could ever really imagine, if on paper, someone who murdered their cousin or something. Well, in this country, this is a hero because everyone recognizes. How many tales can come to mind of historical accounts or whatever, something like that, where it's this guy's a hero, and it's to the people because it's they know that other guy sucked.
Yeah, true.
So it's kind of a brutal reality, but it's whereas in a democracy, you got to kind of go, you got to obfuscate responsibility. Oh, that's that guy in that other task force. That's not me.
John Wilkes Booth hero, by the way.
Yeah. What are you trying to get me demonetized again? What the hell, dude?
All right, let's I did? What?
Yeah. No, not you again. You didn't get me the first time, but it was for a Civil War related thing. Actually, Wilkes Booth related. Anyways, in effect, what the American Constitution did was only this. Instead of a king who regarded colonial America as his private property and the colonists as his tenants, the Constitution put temporary and interchangeable caretakers in charge of the country's monopoly of justice and protection. These caretakers did not own the country, but as long as they were in office, they could make use of it and its residents to their own and their protégés' advantage. However, as elementary economic theory predicts, this institutional setup will not eliminate the self-interest-driven tendency of a monopolist of law in order toward increased exploitation. To the contrary, it only tends to make his exploitation less calculating, more short-sighted, and wasteful. As Rothbard explained, while a private owner, secure in his property and owning its capital value, plans the use of his resource over a long period of time, the government official must milk the property as quickly as he can, since he has no security of ownership. Government officials own the use of resources but not their capital value, except in the case of the private property of a hereditary monarch. When only the current use can be owned, but not the resource itself, there will quickly ensue uneconomic exhaustion of the resources, since it will be to no one's benefit to conserve it over a period of time, and to every owner's advantage to use it up as quickly as possible. The private individual, secure in his property and in his capital resource, can take the long view, for he wants to maintain the capital value of his resource. It is the government official who must take and run, who must plunder the property while he is still in command.
Right. So Hoppe's making the point that he's made, at various points in this book about basically monarchy versus a more democratic system, or versus.
And my boy Rothbard says, "Fuck you too."
Yeah, Rothbard made the same point, I guess, in Power and Market, I think is what that was from. So basically, he's talking about how time preference changes again between the monarchy, where it's more of a sort of private ownership system in a way. The ruler can get away with less, and he wants to hand it down to his heirs and whatever. So he's actually going to tend to not squander those resources as much. Whereas in this system that the Constitution set up, it's the stuff that he already described as being the democratic system, which is temporary caretakers of the government, and they know that they have no reason to to not use up all the resources to their own advantage while they're in there, because they know, like, well, I don't really own this thing. I'm not going to hand this down, right? The stuff I'm going to hand down is my personal wealth. So they're going to take all their personal wealth that they can out of the system so they can give that to whoever their heirs are, right?
Yeah,
the last guy doesn't involve maintaining, like the state itself. Yeah,
the last guy that was in there, Biden, his consciousness was literally fading as he was in office. So, I'm sure he was doing everything in his power to try to extract as much wealth as possible, while he was literally getting ready to shed his mortal coil. So, what reason would he have otherwise? Maybe Hunter Biden presidential prospects, but let's be real, who was ever thinking
Biden.
that? Yeah, well,
the dead one.
Yeah, so. But anyways, on to you, bud. I guess we'll keep moving.
Okay, yeah. Moreover, because the Constitution provided explicitly for open entry into state government, anyone could become a member of Congress, president, or a Supreme Court judge. Resistance against state property invasions declined, and as the result of open political competition, the entire character structure of society became distorted, and more bad characters rose to the top. For free entry and competition is not always good. Competition in the production of goods is good, but competition in the production of bads is not.
That's one of my favorite lines. It seems so dumb. This is but it's actually pretty damn smart.
It's true, yeah. Free competition in killing, stealing, counterfeiting, or swindling, for instance, is not good. It is worse than bad. Yet this is precisely what is instituted by open political competition, i.e. democracy.
Yeah, when you understand the things at place, it's literally an inversion of all the things that are good. It's 100% what you are seeing. You are seeing, as opposed to voluntary actions that, lead to plus. If you look at every interaction between people, you go, it's a plus. There's some sort of equal or coercion where it's someone else, and it's literally complete inversion. So those same exact, principles, those free market principles, you flip them, and now it's just instead of a plus, for every interaction, it's a negative, a negative plus. So plus to the government or whatever. So
we're doing math here now.
Yeah. So it's my point being is it's just completely, if you just look at it as a system, it's a complete inversion. Yeah. As you put it here, it's a competition in the production of goods is good, but competition in the production of bads is not, because essentially you have good things competing to be the best, and then you have bad things competing to be the worst. So it's as dumb as this may sound, that is kind of where you can bring this analysis to. It's do you want good things or do you want bad things? And it's not even that. It's do you want the worst things or do you want the best things? So
he made the point again that with this more democratic structure, the lines again are blurred between the ruling class and the ruled class. So, this is government of the people. So that means there are going to be fewer people resisting what he called them property invasions. But yeah, like the government violating any sort of property, basically. And then, yeah, as you were just talking about there, he's pointing out how this type of system also encourages sort of the worst people, the people that just want power and want to, just take whatever they can out of the system to actually go for those positions more often and compete for those systems. So you basically have a system of competing to be the most evil, essentially.
100%.
Yep. All right. In every society, people who covet another man's property exist, but in most cases, people learn not to act on this desire or even feel ashamed for entertaining it. In an anarcho-capitalist society in particular, anyone acting on such a desire is considered a criminal and is suppressed by physical violence. Under monarchical rule, by contrast, only one person, the king, can act on his desire for another man's property, and it is this that makes him a potential threat. However, because only he can expropriate while everyone else is forbidden to do likewise, a king's every action will be regarded with utmost suspicion. Moreover, the selection of a king is by accident of his noble birth. His only characteristic qualification is his upbringing as a future king and preserver of the dynasty and its possessions. This does not assure that he will not be evil, of course. However, at the same time, it does not preclude that a king might actually be a harmless dilettante or even a decent person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, it's sort of that.
Yep.
The person who's ruling you, it's obvious who that is in a monarchy.
Yep.
So
very,
that
very
guy's
distinct.
Yeah.
He's also has more. He has more on the line so far as not being an absolute complete piece of shit. Now, as I've said before, like you probably could, like let's be real. If like me or you had a ruling class family, you could probably get away for a couple generations of not giving a shit and like kind of raising your kids, however, to be pieces of shit that kind of you just treat the people like whatever and use it for your own I don't know what's the word for lavish lifestyle.
Yeah.
Or something like that, something like insane shows of wealth to where you're just flaunting. You could go nuts with it, maybe, but you have to be like, how much? What's the most you get? Like 1-2 generations before it gets completely. The people just aren't having it. You become no longer economically viable. Like it just will fall apart. So it's just not in many different. And it'll be very clear whose fucking fault it is the entire time.
The people will probably start to revolt against you if you're doing that to too much of a degree as well. Meanwhile, in this democratic system, he's basically pointing out that, well, first of all, you're going to be less likely to push back on what these people are doing because those people could be us. It's the rule of the people again. But he is also pointing out how this system actually it allows people who want to steal other people's property to actually do it in like a perceived legitimate way, where with the monarchy, it's not really perceived as legitimate. It's like, well, that's, this guy's the ruler. Like, that's what it is. He's stealing from us. Whereas in democracy, it's like, well, this guy got voted in because the people decided that we wanted him, right?
Which and they even try to cope you into it's the right thing or because the people want it or whatever. Whereas, like, at least in monarchy, it's just kind of like, well, tough shit. But I mean, they'll be like, yeah, that is fucked up. What are you going to do about it? Like, at least there's an acknowledgement if it's not right, and like maybe if there's enough accumulations of not rights over time, something can happen about it. But like, even in democracy, there's not even an acknowledgement. They try to do the brainwashing of like, no. Like, they've got so many different methods of trying to brainwash that component of it. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's incentivizing the people who want to steal to be the ones who compete to get those positions as well. So the whole thing is essentially backwards from what it should be. In distinct contrast, by freeing up entry into government, the Constitution permitted anyone to openly express his desire for other men's property. Indeed, owing to the constitutional guarantee of freedom of speech, everyone is protected in so doing. Moreover, everyone is permitted to act on this desire, provided that he gains entry into government. Hence, under the Constitution, everyone becomes a potential threat. So yeah, that's the other thing that he was basically mentioning in the previous paragraph, is that in the monarchy there's only one guy who's the threat, the king. Like we know that he's the guy that's the like sort of like legitimate, I guess, property violator. Whereas in the democracy, everyone becomes a potential one because anybody can get into one of those positions. So that's way worse. And like he said in the previous paragraph, also, it is possible that a king, because he's just one guy, he might not actually be expropriating that much property. It depends who the guy is. Whereas in the democracy, it's more likely you're going to get the absolute worst of the worst in there.
Yeah, you're almost stupid if you don't try to get as much out of it as possible. There's not really any reason not to, from a logical perspective. All right, I'll go ahead and finish up the last, since this is kind of, it's basically only one page left. To be sure, there are people who are unaffected by the desire to enrich themselves at the expense of others and to lord it over them. That is, there are people who wish only to work, produce, and enjoy the fruits of their labor. However, if politics, the acquisition of goods by political means, taxation and legislation, is permitted, even these harmless people will be profoundly affected. In order to defend themselves against attacks on their liberty and property by those who have fewer moral scruples, even these honest, hard-working people must become political animals and spend more and more time and energy developing their political skills. Given that the characteristics and talents required for political success of good looks, sociability, oratorical power, charisma, etc., are distributed unequally among men, then those with particular characteristics and skill will have a sound advantage in the competition for scarce resources as compared to those without them. So essentially he's kind of getting out essentially it warps incentives and it corrupts the people is kind of what he's driving at. Essentially, then there are people who are good people and they don't want to steal from anyone else. Well, when you institute a government, you essentially create it. It's like the government for the argument for voting. It's kind of like, well, you kind of have to. Maybe it's not the greatest example. It's kind of like they're going to do, there's always the argument of well, it's one or the other. You got to pick something. And so it's so you're essentially incentivized to take part in this process of theft. Obviously, I'm not saying you are a thief, but point being is it kind of drives home the point that I'm getting at, that it sucks you into this political machination of whatever you need to do, or you could even be someone who's full on in the political game, which I don't know who in the political world would try to tell you otherwise. It's obviously not, it's nothing other than a game of trying to acquire votes, this, that. It's more about, appealing to bureaucratic procedure and in democratic concepts and such, as opposed to anything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's incentivizing more and more people who wouldn't be that way and wouldn't want to get into the government and start stealing from people.
Well, that's my point. They would have to. So they have to increase those ones.
It's like, I'm being stolen from. I can't live this way.
And even then, when he's driving at those of us like me and you with good looks, very social, very great orders, charisma, it's going to. Those are talents of which you actually would thrive in somewhere like politics. But I think you'll probably get at it. It's in a certain sense, you're also kind of taking away. Those are also valuable, leadership characteristics and stuff. And so there might be, I think there's a point for inversion or distortion or destruction here. And the idea of you're taking what are good concepts and things that actually could be utilized in a great way and essentially corrupting them and essentially catching them. Very much like things like the military or cops, how they take this concept that men have, this desire to protect, and they essentially corrupt it. And now you find yourself murdering brown people over in a foreign country. So you're I don't see my freedoms here. What happened? No, you were young, dumb, and full of cum, and some idiot, and somehow you got convinced that freedom came by going over to the Middle East and shooting at people. I mean, I'm not trying to be condescending. I was one of those people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of the point here, is the corruption of, I think, what are noble characteristics or noble things. He kind of makes the point of how these are unequal talents. These are talents these are scarce talents. He literally refers to them as scarce resources, and now they're being misallocated towards evil, literally bad.
Right, the people who are going to develop those skills the most are the people who want to do the evil,
Yeah. Exactly. So it's essentially this, if you want to get into elite theory, it's kind of essentially stealing our elites, So
correct. It's creating false elites, evil elites. Evil elites.
Worse still, given that in every society more have-nots of everything worth having exist than haves, the politically talented who have little or no inhibition against taking property and lording over others will have a clear advantage over those with such scruples. That is, open political competition favors aggressive, hence dangerous, rather than defensive, hence harmless, political talents, and will thus lead to the cultivation and perfection of the peculiar skills of demagoguery, deception, lying, opportunism, corruption, and bribery. Therefore, entrance into and success within government will become increasingly impossible for anyone hampered by moral scruples against lying and stealing. Unlike kings, then, congressmen, presidents, and Supreme Court judges do not and cannot acquire their positions accidentally. Rather, they reach their position because of their proficiency as morally uninhibited demagogues. Moreover, even outside the orbit of government within civil society, individuals will increasingly rise to the top of economic and financial success not on account of their productive or entrepreneurial talents or even their superior defensive political talents, but rather because of superior skills as unscrupulous political entrepreneurs and lobbyists. Thus, the Constitution virtually assures that exclusively dangerous men will rise to the pinnacle of government power, and that moral behavior and ethical standards will tend to decline and deteriorate all around.
Yeah. So again, it's setting up a system where the people who are essentially the least moral, they just don't have any inhibitions about this. They will be the ones that will probably get into most of the positions of power, and they'll also economically benefit from that because they'll be making a whole lot of money out of that. And we see that like in real time, right? Like virtually the entirety of the federal government is all evil people. Like it's an extreme rarity when you get like Ron Paul in there or Thomas Massey. Yeah. Like there's almost nobody like that. And with Ron Paul, of course, when he was running for president, the entire system basically shut him down, and they were like not even including his poll numbers up there, even when he was polling well, and all that bullshit like that. So like Hoppe is saying here, it's almost impossible for somebody who actually does have those morals like that, if they're trying to get into government, and take more of like a defensive stance, basically, they're pretty much not going to be able to succeed. Like that's how this works.
Mm-hmm. All right. Moreover, the constitutionally provided separation of powers makes no difference in this regard. 2 or even 3 wrongs do not make a right. To the contrary, they lead to the proliferation, accumulation, reinforcement, and aggravation of error. Legislators cannot impose their will on their hapless subjects without the cooperation of the president as the head of the executive branch of government, and the president in turn will use his position and the resources at his disposal to influence legislatures and legislation. And although the Supreme Court may disagree with particular acts of Congress or the president, Supreme Court judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate and remain dependent on them for funding. As an integral part of the institution of government, they have no interest in limiting, but every interest in expanding the government's and hence their own power.
Yeah, so talking about the balance of power stuff there, and basically essentially their interests are all going to align with each other to grow the government more. People from all the different branches of government. One thing that I did forget to mention in the previous paragraph was also like talking about how everybody in the federal government is evil. He was mentioning like bribery in there, and immediately I was thinking, well, AIPAC. Like you have almost the entirety of government is completely bought off by AIPAC, the largest, lobby, the Israel lobby, and it's like 90%, I think, of Congress, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Is beholden to them because they have no morals. So they're like, yeah, I'll take all this money. You're going to bribe me and I'll vote for all of your bullshit, all of your wars in the Middle East. Yeah, that's what they're all doing. It's like, I think it's basically the entirety of the Republican Party, I think, right now, except for Massey and MTG, right? And then there are maybe like 10 Democrats who are not bought by AIPAC, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I had a point. Totally forgot it. It's what was I gonna say? No, you're good. You're good. It's the what was I gonna say? It's the misallocation. Oh, that's what I was getting. The misallocation of God, what was the final point here? God, I totally zoned out.
Something about the balance of power. He was talking about the branches of government again. I don't know. I didn't have a whole lot to say about that last paragraph, but
you said something that threw me. That I was thinking of. Anyways,
I said that they all kind of start working in tandem.
Yeah,
the
you're not
branches of
wrong.
government.
But
They're all incentivized to sort of just grow the
I had a
government.
point, and then I knew it was a good one, and now I'm
I
like,
don't know. You mentioned misallocation of resources. I don't know where you were going with that.
ah, damn it, where was I?
After I
going
talked
with
about that, I just talked about APAC's bribery, so I don't know.
Whatever. I forgot my point. Whatever. I totally had a point, but misallocation of something, and I forget where I was going with that now. Oh well, we'll come back to that. I think next time we're talking about obviously what the issues with the limited government, the prospect for revolution. Man, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like riffing a little bit because I'm like, what did I totally had a point.
I know. Yeah. I kind of want to know.
Damn it. Yeah.
reread
I remember it was from a previous paragraph, and I kind of was in my head. I was like, I need to put a pin on that. Come back to it later.
Oh.
It's getting the point too where he was getting at the idea of how you can, how we're getting at like these incentives, how they're going to drive people that are bad to be, or not to be good to be more bad, and those that are bad to be more bad. And also then the idea then he drives into the economic, and the idea that like these incentives are driven to some extent by economics, sort of, in the sense that these people are going to essentially are receiving economic benefits through a corruption of the market. They're receiving benefits, and so essentially he's getting at the point that it corrupts the allocate. Essentially, it's allocating money to non-productive means is what's happening here. Is like the nicest way to say it. Essentially,
worse than non-productive.
Yeah.
It's anti-productive. It's
yes, exactly,
destructive. Yeah.
exactly. It's destructive, ends, and so to kind of drive that point home, I just wanted to make the point that's always brought up, and it's like you don't really think about it until then you put in perspective and think about where's the richest area in the United States, probably in the world, actually.
It's
Washington, D.C.
It's all the people who are politically connected. It's the people that are around Washington, D.C. and the people who are around New York City where there's that like financial hub there, the big banks right there and whatever. Dave Smith has made that point. Like that's where all the politically connected people live pretty much.
Yeah, and so they didn't get that from being productive. Like, are you out of your mind? That was from being the past few paragraphs we were going into all these different skills that they have that, they're all of those skills were taking all the market, all of that money, all that effort, everything. That entire market is literally, it's worse than non-productive, like you made. It's literally destructive. So it's a complete inversion of the market. It's literally hell on earth in a certain sense, if you think about it. Yeah. But with that, we'll leave you at that's what the government is, hell on earth. We probably have one or two more of these for you guys. And so we look forward to hopefully we'll do some more live readings in the future. But with that, Toad, let people know where they can find you at, and we'll do another one of these real soon, probably another week or so, just like last time.
Our series, we can call it Read-Tarded.
Oh, I like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm spitballing there. I have some ideas for the name. I don't know if we continue doing the series with other books. I'm Learn to Toad on Twitter. Learn to Toad on Instagram as well, where I do short form betting content, which is connected to Better Off Dead, BETTOR, which is on YouTube and the audio platforms, my suicidal betting show. And I do have Covered in Uke on YouTube, which is my ukulele project YouTube channel there. I just uploaded that full album that I wrote for Lolita Diaries. I have a full album that I wrote of all ukulele originals. That's up on YouTube now. And I got a Patreon, patreon.com/learntotode. You can get some bonus content there at the higher levels, Uke Spotify stream, and Uke requests. And I think that's it.
Well, hell yeah, brother. We'll do this again soon. For those who support what I'm doing over here, leave a like, share, subscribe. Leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can also follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Those are all little steps you can take without having to chip in any money whatsoever to help grow the channel. Now, if you do want to help grow the channel in the best way you really can with money, I like that, go over to patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The lowest level is $2. And I try to give you guys back your value there. Hopefully you just get that value just from the show, but I do try to give some perks to give you a little bit better than Gen Pop. I give you guys 1 to 2 paywalled episodes a week. I usually keep about 4 or so behind the paywall on any given time, so it's weeks of paywalled content. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You also get access to the Telegram. You get access to the pre-show and priority for the call-ins on me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. It goes out on both of our platforms. And then also on the highest level are my sponsors, and I read them off every episode as a big thank you to them. I have my current guest right now, who is also my previous co-host on the deceased Tower Gang at Learn to Toad.
Let's revive it.
I'm open to the idea. Also at Abrogate D's, at ZOVRCK, at _Zeal, Tim Tuttle, at John Klebold, Will Bell, that's delicious blueberry rabbit eye wine, big fan of the show, Torme, at Wayne Taculus, and not Masad. And with that, guys, we are out of here. Love you all. We will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Peace.